Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Milk the Cow podcast. This episode with Laura Pidcock. I've interviewed quite a few politicians and general people over the years, and I have to say that not all of them are trustworthy. However, I'm pleased to say Laura is 100% legit and one of your own. You can just tell she's like an open book and a good heart shines through, and I think you'll see this in this show. Obviously, I ask her a whole range of questions, and yes, I do ask her about a new party, so stop blowing up my mentions. I record this with Laura a little while ago. Since then, Laura's also left the Labour Party. An interesting point on that. She did it like any other private person, and it was leaked to the press within a couple of hours. So there's questions there to be asked, but obviously ask a lot of questions about Labour within this podcast. Before we start the show, though, if you want to support our work, please go to patreon.com/cowdaily. That's patreon.com/cowdaily. Also, if you want to make a one-off contribution to our work, please go to the PayPal link in the description, and you can do that there. Be a big help. Helps keep the show on the road and keep the lecky on, which, as you can see by the hood, I refuse to put on at the minute because it's really expensive. Well, at least not until later. Anyway, do enjoy the show and looking forward to hearing what you think, and big up Laura Pidcock. Also, I've style bitten your glasses. Sue me. Bye now. Welcome to a new episode of Milk the Cow podcast. This episode, we are blessed to be joined by Laura Pidcock, who is the National Secretary of the People's Assembly, and a lot of you'll know her from being a Labour MP. Also, Laura, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm all right. You caught me off guard
What
there.
were you looking at there?
And I was just sitting, listening intently, thinking, what's he going to say next?
Yeah, I bet.
What he's going to say
Go on,
next.
tell them about what happened before you went on with your desk. Go on, I dare you.
Oh, right. So I was just, one of those days where you're like, how many times are gonna have to apologize to people? So I was plugging the mic in, and essentially everything fell on a glass of water, which fell on the phone, which pulled the laptop down. And I was already running 10 minutes a day, which you were very kind about. So, but I'm here, slightly wet, but I'm here.
What an absolute belt. Wait, honestly, thanks for your time as well. We've been trying to get this arranged for a while, innit? And then just all manner of factors, but here we are, so it's all good.
Life.
First question I want to ask you is, like, what first politicized you? Like, and when was it? Like, how old were you?
Well, I grew up in quite a political household, and by political household, I mean kind of mainstream kind of activism, politics in the sense that we talk about it around the table. We talk about how much we all disliked Thatcher's politics and the impact it was having. I remember really, really early on my parents taking part in activism around apartheid in South Africa. And I think both my parents met through the Labour Party.
Okay.
And my mum grew up in poverty, like a lot of poverty, and I think that has an impact on the stories that you're told and then how you see the system. And so I, from a very early age, started to see things systemically, that if we were going through something in our household, I don't know, like not being able to pay bills. I remember when my dad was made redundant, and you think about it, it's not his individual fault, like what's happening through a political system. So I'm always like really amazed and love people who haven't grown up in that kind of household and find the politics themselves. I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, true. I mean, mine was the miners' strike. I mean,
Was
so
it?
like I'm from a mining family, so it was just nailed on, wasn't it? You know, it was always going to happen, wasn't it?
Never leave you.
But it doesn't leave you, does it? I mean, I've seen classmates like when I was a kid, like not being able to eat and stuff. It kind of politicizes you from a very young age, doesn't it? So that's kind of where they came from for me. You with the People's Assembly now. We will come on to the Labour Party later because people are champing at the bit to ask you. So we've got some questions as well, as we've talked about. But I want to know about the People's Assembly because some people might not know what it is, and you're the National Secretary of it. So do you want to explain to people what it is?
Yeah, honestly, thank you so much for the opportunity, because I'm just so proud to be involved in the People's Assembly. And it's a little bit of they've been going for over a decade now. And I was always kind of aware of them and went on the demonstrations. And I think a lot of the energy and activism of the People's Assembly was kind of reorientated towards Corbynism, and people seeing this person for the first time in their lives saying things that were relevant to them and like speaking to their conditions, and like, oh my goodness, we've got somebody on our side. And hopefully people felt like that about some of the kind of work stuff that I did as well when I was in Jeremy's shadow cabinet. And we got defeated. We got very heavily defeated, and we can talk, as you said, about the Labour Party in a bit. And the People's Assembly have just still, they've kept going. What it fundamentally is about is an opposition to the premise, or this assertion by the establishment, the political class, that austerity is an economic necessity. People's Assembly over a decade ago were saying, no, it's a political choice. There's money there. We've certainly seen that in terms of how the state can react during COVID, if there's like a will, if they kind of need to keep markets going and the engines turning, there are things that they can do. But, that it was fundamentally a political attack on our communities, on our public services, on the pay, terms and conditions of working people. So what has austerity resulted in? Well, a huge transfer of money and, let's be honest, accountability and power to private interests. So if we think about, like local authorities and how much spending power they have and how much outsourcing that has taken place, the privatisation, like longer term, of the rail network, of water, of mail. And then the sustained and continued attack on trade union rights and freedoms. So that ability for a worker, just such a beautiful and simple principle of a worker joining a collective, and that collective building power within a workplace. And then that workplace really organising for all of their sector. So not just about individual rights, but about an entire workplace, or as you've seen with the RMT, an entire industry fighting and standing up for themselves. And so the People's Assembly have consistently said that both austerity and then all of the bits of legislation that further privatisation and the attacks on workers is an ideological attack. It's about punishing working class people, just like you talked about the miners' strike. It's a kind of a continuation of Thatcherism's neoliberalism, where they're saying, how dare you organise, how dare you take power for yourselves, we're going to come and we're going to legislate against you, we're going to try and break your power, and we'll do that in various ways. And so very recently, the People's Assembly, and we've always had this amazing coalition of like the organised industrial labour, so the trade union movement, sit on a steering committee, they have like representatives, and then there are these local groups. So the local groups of the People's Assembly are really where we want to give people a political home. So many people feel like politically homeless at the moment, don't they? Just like, absolutely, who's representing me? Where do I see people? Obviously, OVs other than Mick Lynch and, some other honourable exceptions. Where do I see myself reflected in this whole landscape? And there's a political void and vacuum. And so the People's Assembly, essentially, you can join up for as little as £0 a month. That's really important, that like money is not a barrier to participation. And if people have got money, they can pay a little bit a month. But essentially, it's about bringing people together in those local groups to organise for what people want in their own communities. And that, we don't like to be kind of prescriptive about that. Like, people go to these meetings themselves and say, right, what's wrong with where we live? Who's causing this? And how are we going to organise against it? Or what are we for? What would we like here? And how are we going to campaign for it? As well as, and you'll have seen the People's Assembly taking part in this, these big national mobilisations. So feet on the streets, demonstrations, kind of national expressions of resistance. So it's those two things working together. Still against austerity, still in response to the cost of living crisis, but like trying to articulate where we are now as well, our political
Great stuff.
circumstances now.
So it sounds absolutely magic, and I'm really chuffed. Yeah, I think you've really given a good praise here what it's all about. What else is really good is to see it. I'm really happy to see you excited and happy, because obviously the whole movement's had its head up its arse for quite a while there.
I know, and took a kick in as well.
Oh God, just a bit. I mean, like, you more than most do it because you were in the public eye doing it. So, I mean, the top moment is I just really love the fact that, and I feel this at the minute, and maybe you do too. There's kind of like hope springing back up again. You know what I mean? And I'm feeling like positivity from people, which seems counterintuitive given it's much worse than it's ever been in our lifetimes. But something seems to be stirring. Is that something you feel too?
Yeah, well, I struck up a bit of a friendship with Alan Margam, who's the chair of the Durham Miners Association. And he said something to us which has really stuck with us. And he said that the class loyalty and the solidarity really was solidified when all of the money ran out. So like when it was just like the bags were empty, the money was running out, like, and I think that speaks to some of where we're at now, that like things are really, really difficult. The arguments that Mick Lynch and other brilliant trade unionists are making day in, day out on picket lines is that if your pay is not rising in line with how fast all the other costs are going up, then you are being driven into poverty. And that's an attack on our living standards. And that's just about like how we live our lives as a class, as a working class people, isn't it? And how refreshing is it to see that articulated, to see people saying, we're not going to put up with this. We're not taking this. We can see very transparently the millions and millions of pounds that have gone into the shareholders' pockets. So don't be telling us that we have to bear the brunt of this crisis, the crisis of capitalism, essentially. And you know what I think so brilliant about it is that what I think this means is that people just don't give up. Like the energy and the enthusiasm, while sometimes we might be hurt and like we might be a bit isolated, and particularly with coronavirus, there's just something inward, isn't there, to keep going and to say, do you know what? I agree with him. I'm going to get to the picket. I'm going to join my union. I'm going to join the People's Assembly, or whatever it is. That's because I just think we just don't give up.
Exactly. And I think like on that, I'm hearing that and I'm right on it. But the lad who had the biggest hangover ever the day after the 2019 election would have told you to F off. I wasn't in it though. It was a devastator that morning.
Yeah, I know. And that's all right, I think. Like, why, we kind of be harsh on ourselves, like as if we're not supposed to have feelings of despair sometimes, like bitterness about the people that inflicted this on us. Like, why isn't that a normal reaction? Do you think? I haven't thought, like, what are we going to do now? Like, where do we go now? Like, of course, but then you kind of, there's like shoots of life everywhere, isn't there, that you can hang on to and say, okay, let's not keep looking back. I think you kind of have referenced that, haven't you? Let's not keep looking back. There is a struggle in front of our eyes right now. And so that defeat, it's gone. It's been, there's all this to fight for.
True story, man. And like I say, that morning I felt like that, but over the weeks and the months, it just comes back. And it's like, it's kind of like as natural to breathing, wanting to go out and actually do this stuff, isn't it? Or like make a difference or whatever we want to call it. I mean, you can't really say that without being called a cringe these days, but it is what it is. That's what we're like.
It's what we all do every day, isn't it? And I just don't believe fundamentally, like, I hate this idea, like, that people are fundamentally apathetic. Like, there might be fundamentally apathetic about a cross next to a ballot box where there's no fundamental political choice to be made. That might be apathetic. There was a really high turnout for Brexit when people thought it would make a difference. But, I just think people, if they think they can make a difference, like, get stuck in. You saw that in coronavirus, and so I also felt that pain. I remember seeing the votes for the Tory in that community centre on that night stack up and just think, God, this is going to be a rough ride.
Yeah, just a bit. I mean, how are you now? Because obviously, like, that must have been kind of traumatic for you. Like, in yourself as a human, how does it feel now?
I feel like there was a real process of like learning, so that has had to take place over the last couple of years. or 3 years, nearly 3 years, isn't it?
Mad, innit?
And
Yeah.
I know, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, like you, I woke up the next morning, and just thought, honestly, I can't describe the whirlwind. So a few weeks later, literally a matter of months earlier, you're having conversations, really, really technical conversations about, if you do win, how are you going to legislate for a transfer of wealth and power? Like,
Yeah.
those were the conversations behind the scenes, like trying to work things out with really excellent and knowledgeable people about how to turn this ideology into law.
Mhm.
And then you wake up the next morning and somebody's stolen it all from you.
Yeah.
And not just that, we made mistakes as well, didn't we?
Mhm.
Like, so it's about saying, okay, see if we ever get into this situation again, what are we not going to do? And I don't just mean like electorally, but I mean in the broader fight for working class people. What are we never going to do again?
Good. I mean, obviously, I thought that would be happening, but it's always good, in it, once you get past the absolute like existential horror of it all. I mean, we all worked so bloody hard, man. I ended up getting a spinal surgery because I was sat there with a laptop on us, a phone here, and I was doing 14, 15 hours a day. This was in the 2017 one. I had a spinal surgery because I was locked in that position. It's not just that; it was like I used to do ultra marathons, so that was the finish of it, just being stuck in that position. And obviously 2017 was good. I kept going into 2019, and obviously just had to take a step back after a while. And I'm one of so many people who
But this is what I mean. Like, this is the network that was going on. So like people like Jeremy, myself, other people that were on the TV, like obviously we're in pain, but there was like a lot of people saying to her, like, keep going, thanks for what you did or whatever. Like, there was thousands of people working for that.
Yeah.
With no thanks, really. Like, not much thanks.
For me, it was like, all I want is a world where everybody has what they need and a little bit more. And within reason, I'll work with anybody to achieve it. And the first time I ever voted was for in 2017 because of the miners' strike, because of my politicization, because I couldn't understand the Blair thing, and I was a community worker throughout that period too. So I have like really intimate knowledge of what the poverty situation was, certainly in the Northeast, but also on a national level as well. Like from actually
So were you doing community work in 2017?
Not then, but previous to that for about 20 years. I moved on into doing Milk the Cow full time and the events and everything else that we were doing, so I left it behind. But it was kind of like community work anyway, part of what we're doing, you know what I mean?
It is, and like allowing a space for like left working class ideas to be articulated is so important.
Mm-hmm. Oh, without a doubt. I mean, when you mentioned Jeremy a couple of times, I don't know if you were aware that he did an interview with some colleagues at Declassified UK this week. Yeah.
I mean, I haven't actually seen the interview.
Well, what I might do is I'll have a word with him, and I'm going to read a quote out and just get your reaction to it. But I might, when we edit this, stick it in. If it is, none of this will appear. But so what his quote is if I just scroll back, just bear with us.
No problem.
Right. This is definitely getting clipped, this bit. Me trying to pin a bloody quote.
That's the beauty.
Right, I've got it. Right, so what Jeremy said was, I instructed my office that the meeting had to be treated as confidential. It was leaked by them and leaked in a way to undermine. And what he's referring to is meetings with MI5 and MI6. I mean, you were shadow cabinet at the time, so what were you aware of this going on at the time? Because he's been really candid, Jeremy, this week about what he thinks might have been going on. Obviously, if you can't answer that having not seen it, then I wouldn't put you in that position.
Well, I haven't seen what he said, but just nothing would surprise me. If you think about the shock that the establishment were given in 2017 and how close they came to being confronted with, he is a socialist, Jeremy Corbyn, and most of his shadow cabinet, or a lot of the shadow cabinet, were being confronted with that kind of politics and what that would mean for wealth and power. there is going to be a kickback against that. And we also knew that if in 2017 or 2019 that there was to be a win, that would be like the start of even more brutal attacks against that kind of politics. And I think that speaks to one of the mistakes I think that was made, which was I always wanted, and I know others did, like a really robust street defense almost of the idea. So every time, we're getting ridiculed or attacked in the media, to just be really confident about it, be organizing around it, having demonstrations, community events, like thinking about the ideas and putting a metaphorical arm around each other, because nothing is more important than our loyalty to one another in the face of the brutality of their organized attack. So I'm sure there's files and all sorts, and it's, you don't really want to think about that because it might stop you doing things, but I think that Jeremy just handled all of that really well. You'd quite often meet with him and say, and like you'd walk in and think, how's he going to be? And he'd be like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, how are you fine? You can't be fine. I know.
Do you know what gets me, right? Just on that, people like the band do this thing around that he's weak. Like try and experience a day of what he had to experience, and then talk about weak. That's all I have to say to those people.
And just even the frustration of like reading about, like, so trying to articulate a political ideology that is counter to that which capitalism and the mainstream perpetuates all the time. That's hard enough because you're running up against the grain, aren't you? Then what a lot of the media establishment really want to try and do is discredit you. So all the stories about like how much is earned and expenses on some of those left wingers, and like there was a story about like basically I bought a house but don't own it, I pay a mortgage, like loads of other working class people, that all of that is trying to say, see, they're a hypocrite, and you haven't got time to like, because there's another attack and they're saying this about you and they're saying that about you, and you're trying to do your day job and represent people in surgeries, and Jeremy times it by 1,000, so you can either cry about that or organize in the face of that. There's like only two options. And some of what we didn't do is about enough defense, knowing the ruthlessness of the coalition that would come together to defeat us in 2019, which in my case, if you think about a seat like Northwest Durham, leaflets were being sent out by former Labour, like there was like a leaflet sent out by, people that used to be connected to the Labour Party, talking about, how bad it would be if Jeremy Corbyn was in control, and Liberal Democrats, independents, all of them, just fighting to ensure that we didn't win.
Indeed, and I hear what you're saying for sure. I think what strikes me about it is if what Jeremy's saying is correct, then we have the Secret Services interfering with democracy in our country, and that needs addressing. Like, I mean, we know what the establishment are, but that's some crazy new 2022 shit. That it's like, we've got like the former elected leader of the opposition in this country saying things like this, and like obviously he's speaking his truth, and that is something that I just can't get my head around.
And there are people in our own political party, in the Labour Party that felt like it was a politics that needed stopping. Just so unbelievably painful. But
I mean, just on that, can I play you a little clip? Right, we're going to talk about Starmer now, right? I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire because I can pretty much know what you think. But like, this is from his hustings, right? I think this was in Liverpool as well. So there's the whole emotive set, but like, from his leadership. Anyway, let's play this and come back.
Attacks on Jeremy Corbyn were terrible. They vilified him, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew why they were doing it.
So this is like what he said there, and then he's like kicked him out of the Labour Party. But he was saying that because obviously there was still a lot of left-wing members in the party, in my opinion. So he needed to try and court us to get in. What are your thoughts?
I agree with your analysis. There was a
moving on.
fundamental, there was a fundamental misselling. Loads of people were deeply skeptical of him, and knew that he was not gonna kind of hold on to, because of the journey that it takes the Labour Party to go on and make policy, knew that he was not going to hold on loads of stuff that was in 2017 and 19 manifestos. He missold his leadership. Like he said things that he has done the opposite of. So I sat on the NEC and in meetings where for most of the time it was really just about how they were going to change the rules to shrink the space for socialists,
right,
and to lock out a form of politics long term in the Labour Party that they see as presenting a threat. And that's what I mean. Like the establishment, outside of the Labour Party wanted to defeat us socialists in the general elections, and there's been an exercise in the Labour Party which is about shrinking that space for socialists as well, because there was a shock for the right that Jeremy Corbyn stormed it, and that there was like an awakening inside the Labour Party, and so people are called cranks and they're called entryists, and people are infiltrating, and actually what they're talking about is mass participation in a politics. Imagine standing in front of people and you've taken a party from like 200,000 to 500,000, you've added 300,000 people who are going to be interested. What a threat is that? I wanted to get us to a million members, and like really work on trying to recruit like in working class communities and through, but there just wasn't time, or we were kind of bound up in the constitutional crisis that was Brexit, which swallowed us up, essentially. But Keir Starmer has been dedicated, I think, behind the scenes to fundamentally changing what the Labour Party can be for its members.
Yeah, I feel that. Well, obviously, I feel that too. He's broken every one of his frigging 10 pledges. I'll just be open and honest. I mean, I absolutely despise him because of what he's done and what he hasn't done. It's nothing personal. It's just I think he's a duplicitous bellend, and well, he is, isn't he? Like, I mean, like that's a fact, and also that's my opinion. So, libel, come at us. But it's the top and bottom of it is you can go through every one of those 10 pledges, and he's broken every single one of them. And that clip we've just seen there where he's doing his like doe-eyed kitten, please elect me bit. Like doing that in a city like Liverpool with their history, just what are you doing, man?
I know.
And the whole thing with the sun as well, like that was just, I mean, I don't want to start using like triggering language for people in Liverpool at all, but like I think we all know what we're talking about. That's not okay, ever. Especially when like the parties, does it still have socialism on the membership card? I mean, I'm not sure is that on there?
Social democratic. I haven't checked. I haven't checked my Labour Party card in a while, and we can maybe come on to that. But I think the thing is, what I want to kind of maybe explore a bit with you and other people.
Have you got some more time, by the way? Because we're running on a bit. Like 10. Cool. Let's keep going.
It was my fault. I was late anyway, so we'll use the time. Is that we have to have realistic expectations about, which I have kind of come to through a painful process of learning. Really, is realistic expectations about Parliament. And it really is why I've kind of reorientated a lot of activity to building an organisation which is serious about building working class power. I'm not saying it has to be one or the other. Clearly, we want rid of the Tories. That is another aim of the People's Assembly. It's like, get the Tories out. Like, they're decimating our communities. They have done for over a decade, and in the decades before that. That is a massive priority, isn't it? But why would anyone think it wouldn't be for working class people who are interested in trying to make our communities better? But Keir Starmer wants to be Prime Minister, and I think in his mind, the way he does it is appeal to like a stereotypically constructed version of the working class. One that I just don't recognise. If you go and like have a pint, or like if you're just I don't know, in your own community or some of the stuff that we
Fish and
saw.
chips in Hartlepool, there's another one, that whole
Yes.
optics left thing, aye.
Like, you just know that you can do one of two things as a politician. You can follow public opinion, or you can lead it and you can push the boundaries, and you can say, all right, you're interested in immigrants and you think that, well, something has to be done. Well, let's talk about the reality of what it's like for an asylum seeker or a refugee here. Let's talk about why jobs are lost. Let's talk about post-industrial towns. Like, let's actually try and delve beneath the surface, superficial stuff to what is actually harming us. And that's an economic system that's fundamentally designed to do exactly what it's doing, to survive at the cost of working class people. We're not participants in this, really. Like, we're commodity, we're tools of the system, aren't we? And that's not a politics that Keir Starmer subscribes to. I don't think he might have had his 10 pledges or whatever, but I don't think he's ever kind of talked about fundamental transformation of society, which, if you look at the set of crises, and this is where I'll kind of stop, the set of crises that are in front of us, you cannot just be like tinkering around the edges and going, oh yeah, like global health pandemics, climate catastrophe, a massive attack on living standards, life expectancy, health, hunger, and we'll maybe do some things that might help some people.
Well, this is more the problem I've got with people. Because to me, there's no main parties who've got any solution for everybody who's living in poverty. And I consider that to be evil, because I've worked within communities, seen poverty firsthand. Those people have a name because they're human beings. And obviously, you shouldn't need to have that kind of communication or be around working class people to what I'm saying? It boils my piss so much when we're projected upon as some kind of Hovis advert version of the working class.
Exactly.
And it's so here's an example for you, right? There's this whole benefits Britain scruffs and all that. You worked in the same building as Michael Fabricant. His wig blatantly smells. You cannot tell me, right? Away, man. He looks like his bedroom.
These kind of things in.
This is my opinion. You don't have to say nothing.
Okay.
but what I'm saying is, it's you've worked around people who are put up as sort of better than us because of the class system and because of their upper class, when they would literally be like, who the hell is that in any of our communities? In working class communities, to me, people are well turned out. They look after themselves. Maybe they're stinking a dupe a little bit much, but what can you do?
The thing is, though, you're talking about I suppose political indoctrination of the system, isn't it? About saying, okay, so what we have to do is for this system, for capitalism to survive, and all these Tories that believe in free markets and things, we have to draw a correlation between hard work and poverty. We know that there isn't that correlation. Exactly. We know that that's absolute nonsense, that 2, 3, 4 jobs, we're working longer for less pay, and I remember having to explain this to a Tory in the chamber of the House of Commons, that work can entrench poverty if you're not getting the hours, and you have to spend on transport, if you have to buy your own uniform, if there's an irregularity of the work that you're getting. And they're literally what are you talking about? So there's that kind of, there is the unthinking, but there's the deliberate story that's told to working class people, that you can just kind of free yourself from this through individual pursuit, hard work, being Insta famous or whatever, or your conditions of poverty you can be held to personal account for that. And obviously socialists, what we're always trying to do is collectivize the issues and say, nah, this is not about personal blame, this is not about not getting the best energy deal. Private companies are making an inordinate profit out of your hard-earned wages, and you cannot put the heating on.
I mean, I don't get it either, but let's see how it goes month to month when the bills keep stacking up and the savings keep getting. Oh, well, if people have got savings, that is, to be able to spend on bills.
Exactly. All of, and the kind of the network that you might usually rely on will also start to struggle. And so it's a hard time for, isn't it? In a kind of organising way, but it is our job, and like obviously you do it all the time, to talk about it in political and kind of agitational terms. Like, come on, we need to be angry about this.
Exactly, we do. Can we take some of the questions from listeners, watchers? I don't know. Do you know what it is? I struggle with what to call people other than human beings, like followers. Like, don't follow me. Don't ever follow me. Jesus, that's the last thing you want to do. Right, pull some up. Some of them will be like slightly a much of a muchness, but I'll just scan through. So I'll read this. This is from James Summerson Hollywood, which is the best name I've heard in a week. I was very keen on voting Labour when Corbyn was leading, and was refreshing to see new ministers joining with a more left of centre Labour Party. Now that the likes of Starmer, Rayner, Jess Phillips have stabbed the left in the back, where does Laura, who was on the left side, see the party evolving now they have shafted the members? Has the Labour Party been infiltrated with Tory moles? When we will see a progressive Labour Party again? So do you see the party evolving, basically?
I think it has evolved, hasn't it? So it has changed. Some of the rule changes that they got through in the NEC, I voted against them, was about kind of increasing the power that the Parliamentary Labour Party has in opposition to like how much the membership has, and that obviously has a knock-on effect for if Keir Starmer has to resign, who will come next, and all sorts of other things about kind of selections and stuff like that. So the party has changed from under Jeremy Corbyn in terms of the crude rule book, if you like, and that's why I am saying I don't want to use, and I have a right to say this, I don't want to use my energy on fighting Keir Starmer inside a closed meeting and repeatedly say, I've said to him, you're not representing working class people. This was like in the coronavirus crisis. You need to, I feel like you've retreated from an opposing position when we have this like rampant kind of hard right Tory and Johnson, like the politics. You can go on the politics all the time. It's not just about competence. Like, it has to be about their political ideology. I thought, okay, nobody's listening to me inside that room, that because they're ideologically driven, just like I was and am. It's about competing ideologies. And I thought that it was best to reorientate activity to like challenge and organizing. And so I don't necessarily think that it's an in or out question for people, but it's like, what are you actually doing with your time?
Yeah, exactly. You'll not be surprised at what comes next. I mean, these are just two out of many. Joy Jarrett, does she see a new socialist party on the horizon? David Keir, when is she going to start a real socialist party? Laura, when are you going to start a real socialist party?
Oh, well, you put me washing on first. I joke. I am like a mom, and I have a full-time job, and I'm National Secretary of the People's Assembly. But seriously, on like a political front, I think that if you look at, as I've already said probably 2 or 3 times, the sets of crises that are in front of us, climate change, climate catastrophe, rampant hunger globally, and poverty, exploitation. So, the reason we get to industrial disputes is because of like a breaking point for those workers, and it being the last resort, and having to go out and use their power to stand up against that kind of exploitation. So there's going to be more industrial militancy that I imagine, and who knows, it could be a decade, it could be 2 decades, that if the Labour Party do not start articulating an alternative, there is a huge political void opening up, isn't there?
Well, it's here.
People will want to fill it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, we can go back and forth on this one. Me personally, you couldn't pay us to vote for the Labour Party at all. Like, I will not put a cross in a box next to something led by Starmer, and certainly not something led by Wes Streeton. Simple as, and you can't hide that smile from us, Laura. Anyway, moving on from him.
What are you talking about?
I know what you mean. But I mean, like, the top bottom of it is, I can't do that because I don't trust them to actually deliver on the things that are going to come towards the election and suddenly be all like, look at all these things that we're going to do. I don't believe you. I don't believe you now. I won't believe you then. And I'll actively work against you. And there's so many of us like that. And I'm the lad who busted his spine up trying to get a Labour government in 2017, and then obviously a lesser extent 19 because of that. So if I'm saying that, something's changed, hasn't it? And I'm feeling this out there. Like, I'm not saying a new party would be something that would work, but it would be something that people could coalesce around. And what it does need is like recognizable faces like you and Jeremy to make sense of it. Do you know what I mean?
Like, one thing I think you've just said is like really striking is you worked really so hard like to get a Labour government, and like the Labour Party should be very, very eager to have you involved. Like there should be like a cult, and you know, so many activists that I know that have like left who are running community centres and food banks, they're salt of the earth, they're like unbelievably lush people, and like the Labour Party should be begging them to join them. And it shouldn't be like a cozy club where you feel excluded or like that your views are not welcome or you're going to be alienated or attacked for them. So there is that. And I do know what you mean. You know, we shouldn't have to beg people to be in solidarity when there's industrial action. It's like one of the oldest forms of action that working class people can take to have an ounce of power within capitalism. And there shouldn't be any begging. It should be automatic. It should be as simple as you talk about, like as breathing. It's like, you know, that's just what you do. And so, yeah, this is what I mean. What working class people are they trying to win? Because as far as I can see, the rail workers are working class people. You know, the teachers are working class people. Local authority workers are working class people. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people who don't have that instinctive trust. But I think, by the way, that in terms of the Labour Party, I think Jeremy was a kickback against it. But that relationship between the Labour Party and working class people has been in decline for a long time.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, like I've told the story a few times, but like it's contextual, so I'll say it briefly again. My granddad was a miner and he helped build the party, and he said on his deathbed to me dad, always make sure you vote Labour. He died like in the 80s, and by the time I got to 18, I couldn't do it. So when Jeremy came along and something that looked like the version of the world that my granddad wanted, I was all in, because it was like those years of frustration.
Coming home.
Yeah, just feeling like I was letting him down. But I know for a fact he would have been spinning like a centrifuge during the Blair years in his grave. And I know he's doing it now. So that's kind of me like spirit guide, you know what I mean? It's like, granddad, what do you think?
I do, because I also have like, and I've never really talked about this publicly, but just before the general election, my dad died, and he was very like a Labour loyalist. He was like, if you don't vote Labour, you're basically a Tory, because it's all we've got in a kind of electoral sense, and you know, was a socialist but was quite pragmatic about what the Labour Party could offer. And I often wonder if he would be like, you know, you worry like, am I disappointing him by being quite vocal about how disappointed I am in what the Labour Party is becoming, about their political retreat from defending working class people, and about what kind of political orthodoxy that's creating. Because fundamentally, it's not do a like Keir Starmer, Wes Streeton, and Angela Rayner and all them. That's like, that's tit for tat, isn't it? It's just like, you know, in the same way that people don't like the shirts that Jeremy wore. It wasn't important. But the political orthodoxy that's being created is one where, like, if you think about the kind of threats when people were criticizing NATO, and then it kind of leaves open like the rest of the movement to be vulnerable to attack, to anti-war arguments. You know, and you're like, hang on a second, like, look at the attack on the left in Parliament, look at the effect that has out on the streets, with people kind of worrying what they can and can't say, and kind of being criticized vociferously online. And yeah, that would be the same on kind of taxation and austerity, and you know, So we have to build a pressure to push the Labour Party into a position that is also palatable. And that's how I justify it to myself in the kind of hypothetical conversations with my dad, that this is not, I'm sorry, we're not in the same position that we were
exactly that, yeah.
5 years ago. And I hope he would kind of be with us.
I think you'll be proud of who you are.
Oh,
Simple as
thanks.
that. I think I know we all are. So
And your
your dad's
granddad
gonna
of
be
you,
in
by the way. Yeah,
what,
your granddad of you as well.
Yeah, we're both getting a bit teary-eyed. I'm going to move on a bit.
Let's move on.
Yeah, we'll just put that northeastern face on. Now just moving on to the next thing. That's what people in it. These are our guiding people, and it's like I do think that about me granddad. I do wonder if he'd be proud of what we're doing, and I think because they just wanted a better world. At the end of the day, geez, I'm moving on. I'm absolutely going to break down crying. I mean, I love me granddad. I'm telling you.
Did you? Honestly, my dad was like my best friend as well, and it's kind of like they're part of the building blocks of who you are. And if you feel like you're going against part of a building block, it's like, I just sometimes wish I could say, is it all right? But I know in my heart of hearts that actually the loyalty is a loyalty to our class, isn't it?
It
and
is.
saying, okay, if anyone is being hurt, if there's things that are being done to us that are fundamentally damaging, we have to speak out about that, no matter who it is.
Got to, mate. We've got to. I think we've put our head back on. You're a pro there. Nice one. Right. Sarah Cooper, simple question. What happened to Labour? I mean, give a quick 30 seconds on that. I know it's a broad question, but they're often the best ones.
That's an existential question, isn't it? What? I mean, we've got... Labour has just changed. What I don't think was communicated well in, say, like the Corbyn years was, how like, honestly, it is so cringe, but like, oh, we're under new management, was that people tried for about 4 decades to have that Corbyn moment, didn't they? And like organised in rooms where like 2 people would turn up, and then all of a sudden 2,000 people, and you're like, we need bigger venues and stuff like that. And unequivocally shame-free to be like, hi comrade, because it's just like a term of affection about being in a struggle with each other, not the kind of dangerous positioning of everybody else. And so there was just like a culture change, wasn't there? And the left, in my view, were politically defeated, and that has an impact then on what the Labour Party will say. The two are not connected. They are completely interrelated.
So, I mean, what you've been saying is that obviously the left have been politically defeated. Obviously, within the NEC, you resigned for reasons you've already expressed. Do you honestly, in your heart of hearts, feel we can work within the Labour Party and change things and get things like working for millions of people living in poverty? Full disclosure, I don't think that's possible given the people that are actually involved in doing what you've said, which is remove the space for the left to exist in it. So logically, outside of what spirit guides and what they may or may not be saying, do you honestly think that that's going to happen?
Well, what I think is that we've got to support socialists everywhere.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think the most dangerous thing that can happen for all of us, whether you're in the Labour Party, the Communist Party, Tusk, Breakthrough, whatever it is, however you express, or nothing, however you express yourself politically, is that our space to articulate an alternative is not shrunk. So wherever there is a socialist using their platform, we have to elevate that, amplify that, broaden out the space where we are occupying that space with our politics. And so, I am supportive of the socialist campaign group of MPs that use their platform inside Parliament to articulate socialist values, because hundreds of thousands of people can see that, in a way that and maybe an activist can't. But it isn't an either or. Some of the most powerful people in our whole world are trade union representatives inside the workplace, having these conversations with fellow workers. So I try to refrain from being like, get out the Labour Party or stay in the Labour Party, because I'm fundamentally interested in what your activity is and making sure that I will work with people who, like, the People's Assembly is a coalition of anybody who is against austerity, anybody who is against, you know, within reason, anybody who is interested in standing up for working class communities. It's a broad coalition. I'm not going to have like some kind of morality test or some kind of purity test, you know, to stand on a picket line with people. It's about advancing our class interests wherever and whenever possible. So what's happened to the Labour Party? If they're not articulating what is in our class interest, we have to put pressure on the Labour Party to do so in our communities, on the streets, inside the Labour Party if you wish, you know, inside branch meetings if you wish. But all of us, if you think about, and honestly, I just like to come back to this repeatedly, if you think about the ruthlessness of the coalition that the establishment form, we have to match that, like, and quadruple and, you know, build a mass movement. Like the Police Crime Courts and Sentencing Bill.
Yeah.
And like some of the powers in relation to protests, like they can't arrest 2 million people, can they?
They can't.
Do you know what I mean?
But they're going to arrest, like, 2 million people aren't going to do direct action though. So it's kind of like,
well, they might protest, and, you know, we have to build resistance that looks after each other, and it has to be a proper strategy, and it has to be really well thought out, because you're right, we don't want kind of working class people to just be like expendable and, you know, arrested here, there and everywhere. But direct action, we've seen recently, works, you know, and is another form of how we articulate our class demands, if you like. And I just think we only get to that biggest, broadest possible coalition moment if we're looking after each other and not, you know, slagging each other off online or saying, you know, oh, well, your position on this means I cannot work with you.
Yeah, I mean, we're having a reasonable discussion now. We've got divergent opinions on this particular issue, but we agree on most things. So I think, you know, that's a model for how discussion should be, I think. I mean, like, I personally feel that you and Jeremy should go and face up this thing and bring others in with, like, the Mick Lynches of this world and all of that to make sense of it for a young, talented, well, you're still young, I'm not, but a young, talented amount of people coming through to take over. Do you know what I mean? And you absolutely are seen that way by people on the left or people in wider society. And I suppose I wanted to use this opportunity to say that I'm not trying to convince you to do it though, because I would never do that to anybody, particularly on camera. Do you know what I mean?
Know, and I suppose, right, I'm just saying that there are no shortcuts. There's none. There's none. And so, like, this is why I think building that class solidarity and organising ourselves inside communities, what that does is it allows us to have political conversations. It allows that kind of struggle to formulate the coalitions, doesn't it? And you know, that's obviously like a very powerful thing, because you're not going to go, oh, I don't know, I cannot work with you when you've been in a struggle together that has delivered something for your own community, or you've had a really robust, and this is what I honestly, like, I do believe that we have to create more spaces, and I think you do it, and I love that you ask loads and loads of questions, by the way, and like try and elicit the dialogue. Is we are not going to get our class consciousness from anywhere else other than ourselves, and challenging each other and creating the space to do that, basically, and that will lead to a kind of more robust movement, I think.
I agree, and I mean, like, I think everything that you're saying is true, and yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm still hold the position that you should, but that's me telling you to go and do something as a human being. And I would never do that, but, like, you know, because the thing is, you're like well-known people, so often people will see you in the abstract rather than Laura the human being, Jeremy the human being. Like, I'm not trying to push you because I don't know what that effect of the experience that you've already had on you, and I don't honestly think anybody could ask any more of you for what you have already done so far. So if you decided to, I'll applaud you and support you doing it. If you don't, I'll still applaud you and support you. I hope that gets across, because I've got all the respect in the world for what you are doing. And if I didn't, I would say that too, because like
Oh,
I think,
I know, and that's what I love. I absolutely love being challenged, and I don't think I've ever had my mind changed by being in agreement with people. And so that takes us to like a much more, in my view, like beautiful, richer place if we're able to have these disagreements. When does this go out, by the way?
I'm gonna work on it over the weekend, so it'll be next week.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna give a shout out because Jeremy is on the picket line in Newcastle tomorrow.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll do a separate video, right? When we finish this, the two of them will go live on the page, and you can say the thing. Do you want to do that? Because it's tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Nice one. Well, I tell you what, we'll just wrap it up there and do it, because, like, I mean, we could obviously talk for the rest of the day, but we've both got like other things that we've got to do as well.
Know.
So, honestly, Laura, I've loved this. It's like I've got all the respect in the world for you, who you are as a human being, and everything that you've done. And again, as I said, nobody could expect anything more of you than what you've already given. But if you happen to give it, we'll be right there with you. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, thanks, mate. All the very best. But stick around. We'll do that quick live.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, mate. See you in a bit. Right.